For years, Dubai has been seen as untouchable, a glittering economic powerhouse rising from the desert, a global hub of luxury, finance, and diplomacy. While conflicts have erupted across the Middle East, Dubai remained insulated, a city of skyscrapers, shopping malls, and stability in a region often defined by volatility. But on this particular night, that perception was shaken. Shortly after midnight, as most of the city slept under its neon glow, a sudden flash lit up the sky near the United States Consulate compound. Within moments, thick black smoke began rising from an area close to the parking section of the diplomatic facility. Residents in nearby districts reported hearing a distant but distinct blast. Social media quickly filled with shaky phone footage capturing smoke drifting above one of the most secure zones in the city. Authorities later confirmed that the incident was the result of a drone-related strike. According to initial reports, it was a one-way attack drone, a type often used in modern asymmetric warfare. The drone reportedly struck near the consulate's outer area, igniting a fire that emergency crews managed to contain within a short period of time. Fortunately, no injuries or casualties were reported. Staff inside the compound were said to be safe, and the fire was extinguished before it could spread further. But even without casualties, the symbolism of the strike was powerful. Dubai is not just another city in the Gulf, it is a financial artery for the region, a meeting ground for global powers, and a strategic partner to the United States. An attack near an American diplomatic facility here sends a message far beyond the immediate physical damage. It signals reach, it signals intent, and perhaps most importantly, it signals escalation. This strike did not occur in isolation. It came amid an already intensifying confrontation between Iran and the United States, a conflict that has been unfolding rapidly over recent days. Following the dramatic events of late February, when regional tensions exploded into open military exchanges, multiple US-linked sites across West Asia have reportedly been targeted. Naval installations, intelligence-linked compounds, and military air bases have all appeared on the expanding map of hostilities. Yet Dubai had been perceived as relatively secure. The United Arab Emirates had publicly emphasized that it was not a direct party to the conflict. Officials had appealed for restraint and called for de-escalation, positioning the country as a neutral economic center rather than an active military participant. Flights had briefly slowed in previous days due to regional instability, but operations were gradually resuming, signaling a return to normalcy. Then came the drone strike. What makes this development particularly significant is the pattern emerging from recent attacks. The targets appear consistently associated with the United States. Intelligence facilities, air bases, diplomatic compounds, all linked in some capacity to American presence in the region. This suggests a calculated approach rather than random aggression. It appears to be a strategy focused on signaling to Washington without necessarily engaging Gulf governments directly. However, the risk lies in miscalculation. Any strike on diplomatic property carries serious implications under international law. Even if the damage is limited and no lives are lost, the act itself raises the stakes dramatically. Diplomatic missions are symbolic extensions of a nation's sovereignty. Targeting them, or even striking nearby, creates a powerful psychological and political impact. In the hours following the incident, statements began emerging from both sides. American officials reiterated earlier warnings that retaliation could follow if U.S. assets were attacked. Prior intelligence advisories had already urged non-essential personnel to leave certain facilities in the region. Staff had reportedly been instructed to remain indoors as a precautionary measure. These steps now appear prescient. Meanwhile, Iranian-linked messaging channels frame the broader regional strikes as part of a defensive campaign. Whether this particular incident was officially acknowledged or not, the wider narrative of resistance and counteraction continues to fuel the escalation cycle. For residents of Dubai, the emotional impact may be even more profound than the physical damage. This is a city accustomed to stability, a city where business deals worth billions are signed daily, a city that markets itself as a safe haven in a turbulent region. Seeing smoke rise near a foreign diplomatic compound challenges that image. Markets are sensitive to perception. Tourism thrives on confidence. Investors rely on predictability. Even a single high-profile security incident can ripple outward, influencing economic calculations far beyond the blast radius. The broader question now is whether this marks a turning point. Was this an isolated warning shot, or the beginning of a sustained campaign targeting U.S.-linked sites across Gulf states? Much depends on how Washington responds in the coming hours and days. Strong retaliation could widen the conflict. A restrained response might signal an attempt to contain escalation. But restraint can also be interpreted as weakness in high-stakes geopolitical confrontations. As the smoke cleared and emergency crews withdrew, the city's skyline remained intact. Traffic resumed. Lights continued to shimmer across the waterfront. On the surface, Dubai looked unchanged. Yet beneath that calm exterior, a new uncertainty has taken hold. The region stands at a delicate crossroads. One drone, one strike, one symbolic message. Sometimes that is all it takes to shift the trajectory of a conflict. And tonight, Dubai found itself no longer merely observing the war from a distance, but feeling its tremors firsthand. To understand why a strike near the US Consulate in Dubai carries such weight, we need to step back and examine how this confrontation reached this level in the first place. The events of that night were not random. They were the product of days, and in many ways years, of mounting tension, strategic calculations, and unresolved rivalries that have defined the power balance in West Asia. The current wave of escalation began in late February, when direct military exchanges between Iran and US-aligned forces moved from shadow operations into open confrontation. For years, much of the conflict between these sides had remained indirect. Cyber operations, proxy engagements, intelligence maneuvers, and economic sanctions shaped the battlefield. Rarely did events spill into such visible and kinetic action across multiple countries at once. But once the cycle of retaliation began, it accelerated rapidly. The first wave reportedly focused on military infrastructure. U.S. naval assets in the region were placed on high alert. Air defense systems across Gulf states were activated. Regional bases associated with American operations became potential targets. The logic was clear. If one side strikes, the other responds in a way designed to restore deterrence. The danger, however, is that each response often exceeds the previous action in intensity, creating a spiral that becomes increasingly difficult to control. Iran's strategy, as many analysts interpret it, appears layered. On one level, there is direct retaliation against US-linked sites. On another level, there is a broader message to the region, a demonstration that no American presence in West Asia is completely beyond reach. The use of drones fits this pattern. Compared to ballistic missiles, drones are relatively inexpensive, flexible, and capable of bypassing certain defenses. They allow for precision signaling without necessarily triggering immediate large-scale war, at least in theory. However, theory and reality often diverge. As strikes were reported in various Gulf locations, anxiety spread across neighboring states. Countries that host U.S. bases or maintain security cooperation agreements found themselves in a precarious position. Many of these nations rely on American military partnerships for defense, yet they also seek to maintain stable economic and diplomatic ties with regional powers, including Iran. Being caught between these competing forces is a delicate balancing act. Dubai's situation exemplifies this tension. The United Arab Emirates has long positioned itself as both a strategic U.S. partner and a regional diplomatic actor. It has pursued economic diversification, foreign investment, and global integration. Stability is central to that vision. An expanding conflict threatens not only security, but also the long-term economic model that underpins the country's success. What makes this escalation particularly alarming is the widening scope of targets. Early strikes were focused on clearly defined military objectives. But as days passed, reports began referencing locations beyond traditional battlefields. Intelligence compounds, logistical hubs, and diplomatic facilities entered the picture. Each new category of target lowers the threshold for further retaliation. Diplomatic sites are especially sensitive. Under international norms, they are meant to be protected spaces even during periods of extreme tension. Striking near such a location carries symbolic weight far beyond the physical impact. It signals that the conflict is no longer confined to purely military installations. Meanwhile, Washington's posture has hardened. Prior advisories urging non-essential personnel to leave certain facilities suggest that intelligence assessments anticipated potential strikes. Public statements from American leadership have emphasized that attacks on U.S. interests will not go unanswered. The phrase, barrage of strikes, has entered official rhetoric, indicating preparation for a potentially forceful response. This dynamic creates a volatile equation. If the United States retaliates strongly, Iran may feel compelled to escalate further to maintain credibility. If the response is limited, hardliners could interpret it as insufficient, inviting additional strikes. Each side must weigh not only military effectiveness but also political perception, both domestically and internationally. Beyond the immediate actors, global powers are watching closely. Energy markets are particularly sensitive to instability in the Gulf. A significant portion of the world's oil and gas supply flows through this region. Even limited disruptions can trigger price volatility. Investors react quickly to uncertainty, and prolonged escalation could have economic consequences far beyond West Asia. Civilian populations across neighboring countries now face a new psychological reality. Even if most strikes are aimed at strategic assets, the proximity to urban areas generates fear. Modern warfare often blurs the line between military and civilian spaces, especially when drones and long-range systems are involved. Air defense interceptions, debris, and secondary fires all increase risk. Another critical factor is communication. In rapidly evolving crises, misinformation can spread as quickly as verified reports. Social media footage, unofficial claims, and speculative commentary can intensify panic. Governments must manage not only the physical security situation, but also the information environment. Clear messaging becomes essential to prevent overreaction and maintain public confidence. At the heart of this confrontation lies a broader struggle over influence and deterrence. Iran seeks to demonstrate resilience and the capacity to respond to pressure. The United States seeks to maintain its regional posture and protect its personnel and assets. Gulf states seek stability above all else, attempting to avoid becoming battlegrounds in a conflict driven by larger strategic rivalries. The strike near the US Consulate in Dubai, therefore, is not just a local incident. It is a node in a much larger network of actions and reactions. It reflects a shifting battlefield where geography no longer guarantees insulation. It underscores how interconnected the region has become, politically, economically, and militarily. As tensions continue to mount, the key question becomes whether there are off-ramps available. Diplomatic back channels, third-party mediation, and confidence-building measures could potentially slow the escalation. Yet in moments of heightened emotion and political pressure, compromise can appear costly. The coming days will likely determine whether this phase of the conflict stabilizes or expands. If additional Gulf-based U.S.-linked facilities are targeted, pressure for decisive retaliation will intensify. If strikes pause, space for diplomacy might reemerge. For now, the region stands in a state of suspended tension. Military assets remain on alert. Governments issue advisories, markets fluctuate, and ordinary citizens across West Asia watch closely, aware that events unfolding in one city can quickly reverberate across borders. The drone strike in Dubai was a signal, but it is part of a much louder conversation unfolding across the entire region. Whether that conversation moves toward de-escalation or deeper confrontation remains uncertain. Now, the central question facing the region and the world is simple but deeply complex. What happens next? When a diplomatic compound linked to the United States is struck, even if casualties are avoided, the pressure to respond becomes immense. For Washington, credibility is at stake. For Iran, deterrence and strategic messaging are at stake. And for Gulf states, like the United Arab Emirates, survival in the middle of a geopolitical storm is at stake. The United States now faces a narrow path. A strong military response could aim to reassert deterrence quickly. This might involve targeted strikes against drone launch infrastructure, command centers, or regional military facilities associated with the attack network. The goal in such a scenario would be to demonstrate that attacks on American assets carry a clear and immediate cost. However, decisive action always carries the risk of expanding the battlefield. Iran could respond with additional strikes, possibly increasing the intensity or targeting more strategically sensitive locations. On the other hand, a measured or limited response might focus on cyber operations, covert actions, or diplomatic pressure, rather than overt military escalation. This approach would aim to avoid a full-scale regional war while still signaling resolve. But restraint can be misinterpreted. In high-tension environments, perception is everything. If one side believes the other is hesitant, it may feel emboldened to push further. Iran's calculus is equally complicated. From its perspective, recent actions may be framed as retaliation rather than aggression. By targeting sites associated with the United States rather than directly attacking Gulf governments, Tehran may believe it is sending a calibrated message. Yet the physical geography of the Gulf makes complete separation impossible. When a drone flies over urban airspace and strikes near a diplomatic compound, civilians inevitably feel the shockwaves, physically and psychologically. The economic implications are already being closely monitored. Dubai is more than a city, it is a financial engine for the broader region. International corporations, shipping companies, airlines, and investment firms operate out of its infrastructure. If security concerns grow, insurance premiums for cargo and flights could rise, tourism could face cancellations, investors might adopt a wait-and-see approach, even short-term instability can generate long-term economic hesitation. Energy markets are another critical variable. The Gulf region plays a central role in global oil and gas supply chains. Any sustained conflict that threatens shipping routes or infrastructure would ripple across global economies. Prices could spike rapidly, affecting everything from transportation costs to inflation in distant countries. This is why major global powers, even those not directly involved in the confrontation, are watching developments with heightened attention. Beyond economics, there is the human dimension. Residents of Gulf cities are accustomed to stability and rapid development, not the visible signs of conflict. Seeing smoke rise near a diplomatic compound disrupts that sense of normalcy. Governments must now reassure their populations while quietly reinforcing defenses. Air defense systems may be upgraded. Surveillance and counter-drone capabilities could be expanded. Security protocols around diplomatic and military facilities will likely tighten significantly. Another important factor is regional diplomacy. Countries that maintain relations with both Washington and Tehran may attempt to serve as mediators. Back-channel negotiations could intensify behind closed doors. Public rhetoric may remain strong, but history shows that even during intense standoffs, private communication channels often remain open. The challenge lies in finding an off-ramp before actions on the ground outpace diplomatic efforts. There is also the possibility that this phase of escalation is designed to be limited, a show of capability rather than a prelude to sustained war. In modern conflicts, signaling plays a crucial role. Demonstrating reach, resilience, and technological capacity can sometimes achieve political objectives without prolonged fighting. However, signaling requires precise calibration. One miscalculation, one unintended casualty, or one intercepted message can rapidly transform a limited exchange into a broader confrontation. President Donald Trump's earlier statements about potential strikes within the next 24 hours add another layer of urgency. Public declarations constrain flexibility. Once timelines are announced, expectations form. Allies expect protection, adversaries prepare for impact, markets brace for volatility. In such moments, decisions taken in war rooms can alter the trajectory of entire regions. For Gulf nations, the priority remains containment. They seek to prevent their territories from becoming primary battlegrounds. Public appeals for restraint reflect both diplomatic positioning and genuine economic concern. These states have invested heavily in projecting images of safety, innovation, and opportunity. Sustained instability threatens years of strategic branding and infrastructure development. The broader Middle East now stands at a crossroads shaped by deterrence, perception, and timing. If retaliatory cycles continue unchecked, the map of targeted sites could expand further. Additional consulates, air bases, naval installations, or intelligence facilities might enter the equation. Each new strike would raise the emotional temperature and narrow diplomatic space. Yet history also offers examples where escalation halted unexpectedly. Sometimes, after a series of intense exchanges, both sides quietly step back, claiming victory domestically while reducing visible hostilities. The question is whether political leadership on all sides sees advantage in escalation or stability. As night falls again over Dubai, the skyline still glows. Flights still land, financial markets still open. Life appears to continue. But beneath that surface, calculations are unfolding at the highest levels of power. Military planners analyze satellite imagery, Intelligence agencies monitor communications. Diplomats engage in urgent calls across time zones. The drone strike near the US Consulate may ultimately be remembered as a brief flash in a tense period, or as the moment when a contained rivalry shifted into a more dangerous phase. That outcome will depend on choices made in the coming days. For now, the region holds its breath. Because in modern geopolitics, escalation does not always announce itself with a declaration of war. Sometimes it begins with a single drone in the night sky, a column of smoke rising over a city that believed it was beyond the battlefield, and a question echoing across capitals around the world: how far is this willing to go?